Hi class, welcome to the first lecture for this week, and today I want to focus specifically on the rise of mobile technologies as it relates to the documentation of location, as location becomes an increasingly important part of our documented lives. And we're going to experiment with this on Friday by tracking each other's movements in real time, and possibly also through Twitter if you choose, or Instagram if you choose to use those platforms instead. And the reason we do this is for a couple of reasons. The first aspect is thinking about how our sense of self is constantly related to the social awareness of where others are in real time. Knowing where people are in your life at any given moment is a part of our social identity. This is what is called social proprioception. And proprioception is the sense of where the body ends and the world begins. And a part of your social proprioception is knowing where you are and where others are at any given moment. Proprioception is in part something that the body does as it experiences the world that allows you to walk through doors without bumping into them. Or even as your body is understood to extend out through technologies like a car, allows you to pull into a parking spot without getting out and measuring and figuring out where the car is going to turn and is it going to hit the car next to it. You know, you have a sense of your body as it extends out into the world, in part perhaps why we hate tailgating so much. It's an invasion of personal space because your body, in essence, is connecting through this technology, and you know where it ends. You know where the boundaries of that technology are because it serves as an extension of your body. We are tracking each other in real time this week as a process of, in essence, figuring out where you end and the social world begins, and being able to connect with people and understand that their location matters. It says something about who they are. And that's essentially why we are doing this week, is to understand why location matters for identity, and then also thinking about how it relates to documentation, about what you're saying to the world around you. So this is all within the context of the rise of mobile computing, which comes out of the desktop model into the ubiquitous computing model of computing. In the late 70s and early 80s, in essence, when you were connecting to a computer as an everyday computer user in the world, the people who were using computers at the time were doing so through a desktop computer. They would go to that computer in the home or in the office and access information. Now, essentially, people are calling this a massive paradigm shift because the computer is not something you go to, it's something that's with you at all times. You can access an array of information wherever you are, and often that information is about the location you're at. It is about where you are, where you need to go. It's about what's nearby, what people have said about it, and contributing your own information about that restaurant, that bar, that hotel, that cultural landmark, what story you have to tell about it. Location is a part of the data we are producing. And this is what the article this week that we read essentially is calling the spatial self. It is about your identity as it's exercised and practiced through the spaces that are meaningful to you. And we're doing this in a wide range of ways, and often with our mobile technologies. And this is really the core tenet of Hassan Elahi's Tracking Transience project. His identity is about where he's at, what he's doing in those spaces, and the fact that you can find out where he is at any given moment. This is his location as directly related to his identity. And in essence, this is what this week is about the documentation of identity as it's conveyed through location. So we've essentially had mobile media as long as we've had media, dating back to at least papyrus and clay tablets. It's been a core part of media broadly as long as we've had it. But what's shifting is that you no longer have to go to content. The content is coming to you. And this is true of mobile media throughout history. The paradigm shifts that these media have introduced each time a new mobile medium comes about is essentially that the message comes to you. You don't have to go to the message. You don't have to go to the inscription on the wall. You don't have to go to the plaque or the statue to get the information. Instead, it comes to you in mobile format. And this changes the way that we're sharing information. And it has massive impacts on social connectivity, about what it means to be social and to connect with others, especially others who are distant from us, who are geographically far away. So throughout mobile media, the history of it, place has mattered. Place has always mattered for mobile communications, and it matters for our own practices of our mobile devices. Place matters. And a part of that place is understanding that proximity matters as well. What's nearby? Who is nearby? How can I find out that information? What information is local as opposed to global? And mobile media have tapped into the importance of location and the importance of site specificity as a part of its mode of communication. And this is extended to a field of study called mobilities. Mobilities was launched by several scholars, one of which being John Urry. And John Urry has essentially argued that we as scholars should stop talking about society and instead talk about mobility. Mobility is going to be the key term that much of our scholarship is going to be formed around, because that is one of the key aspects of what it means to be in culture. Because essentially we have movements of people, you have diasporas, you have tourism, you have exiles, you have all these people moving for work. People are in movement and commuting all the time. Movement is a part of our everyday lives around the world in the wide range of shapes that it takes. From being a commuter from the suburbs to the city, to being a refugee from a country as you're fleeing from a war-torn city. Movement is a part of what it means to live in our current era. Alongside that, we have the movement of commodities, of global shipments of products. We have the movement of data across lines of communication around the world. So movement is a key term for our current era. So as we think about the impact of mobile media, it's in the context of mobility as we know it, as being a core term to understand what it means to live in our contemporary society. Use of these phones now, as we have them on us, we are essentially creating a massive amount of data as part of our movements through space. And essentially the documented life is in the mobile era about your relationship between information and location, and what information you can share about a location and what that location can say about you as an individual. And we see this cycle happening. And much of this is predicated on the cell phone's use of location awareness, of tapping into the GPS capabilities of a phone. But prior to May 1st, 2000, in the year 2000, there was no way to accurately have a cell phone use GPS coordinates. Now, much of what we do in terms of the phone's relationship to its locations is all based on GPS coordinates and the phone being able to utilize those coordinates in a specific way. What we had was called selective availability to these signals prior to the year 2000. Prior to that, essentially, GPS was launched by the U.S. military and is maintained by the U.S. military. The satellites that are in the air are all run by the military. And again, they thought no one would ever need access to GPS. Outside of the military, if they needed GPS, they could have it, it just wouldn't be accurate. Why in the world would anybody need accurate coordinates? We're not going to give it to them. And then in the Clinton administration in 2000, on May 1st, they lifted this selective availability and let everyone have access to these. And we've seen how it's changed culture as we know it. That location and knowing where you are, what street corner you're standing on, can have really significant implications for business and also for personal life. And even artistic projects that people create. One of the first uses of GPS after selective availability was lifted on May 2nd, the day after, a guy went out into the woods in the Portland, Oregon region, placed a container, found its coordinates, and then posted online, I placed this container in the woods in Portland using these coordinates. Go test out how accurate your GPS signals are now. And this started the game of geocaching.
What is geocaching?
Well, it's kind of like hiking and treasure hunting at the same time. It's sort of popular, actually.
Oh. I've never heard of it at all.
You download longitude and latitude coordinates from a website into your GPS, which leads you to these caches that people have hidden.
One of the geocaching rules is that if you take something out, you have to put something back in.
So gaming, the arts, and business have all been deeply impacted by the availability of GPS. And what's interesting now is that you are also leaving trails of your data behind. It was discovered a couple of years ago that your iPhones, if you have one, were actually tracking your location at all times, regardless of whether or not you have actually allowed it to do so, requested it to do so. It kept a log of where you were at, and every time you plugged your phone into your computer and access iTunes, it would download that data, and anyone with access to your phone or your computer could essentially see every single place that you've been. And people imagine this to be a huge violation of privacy. And this is one of the aspects that I want to carry over from last week in terms of surveillance. Why is location so private? What is it about location that we hope to keep secret, especially in an era when you're out walking on campus? It's not a private activity. It's just you don't want everybody to be able to know where you are at all times. Location is directly linked to identity, and it's not something that all of us are very comfortable with sharing broadly to anybody, to a part of the invisible audiences that we've been talking about throughout the class. Location is a sensitive piece of data that when you document it, you don't necessarily want that documentation to be spread widely. And again, this is something we're going to experiment with on Friday to understand what the relationship between privacy, identity, and location are. And this is something I'd be interested in hearing on Twitter. If you would be interested in responding to the question, why is location and privacy so fundamentally bound together? What is it about a person's location that we are fearful of disclosing? As opposed to the other kinds of participatory surveillance we're very willing to share on sites like Facebook, all the photographs, all of the data. What is it about location that taps into a certain aspect of privacy that many are not willing to share? And that's something I'd be interested from hearing from you on Twitter. So please respond to that. Last point I want to make is the idea of spatial practice. Is the idea that essentially spaces are produced by your actions in those spaces. A space is not this preformed entity that you enter and live in. Space is something that you actually produce through your practices. It means something because of the way you interact with it. A space like your house essentially becomes a home, becomes your home in a meaningful way by the ways that you interact with it. It's not that home until you make it that home. And this is the difference between space and place. A space is this unformulated location, but a place is something meaningful. It has particular resonance with you based on your practices of that. And the ways that your documented life interact with locations and turn them from space into place is often based on the technologies that we bring to those locations to make them meaningful, to share our interactions in the locations, to share what we're doing in certain places as a part of who we are and a part of the documentation of our lives that we are producing. We are producing these places that are meaningful through our practices of documentation and formulating this undifferentiated space into something more meaningful, a place that means something to us. So I look forward to hearing from you on Twitter and continuing the conversation as we wrap up the class in these last 2 weeks.